I don't know when it started, when a simple glance from him began to feel like a pulse against my ribs, instead of just another look. Maybe it was always there, buried somewhere quiet, waiting. What I do know is this: something was different the moment we packed our bags for the camping trip. 3 days, just the two of us, away from everything familiar. No city noise, no work, just the mountains, the air, and him. He was humming while loading the car, the sleeves of his hoodie pushed up to his elbows, forearms tense as he strapped the cooler in place. I stood there pretending to check my bag again, mostly so I could watch him without feeling like I was watching. God, he's always been this effortless, always him. But lately, that effortlessness made something ache deep in my chest. He turned to me with that half smirk of his. You triple-checking your socks again, or are you just stalling? I don't trust you not to forget the tent poles, I said, slinging my duffel bag over my shoulder, trying to sound casual. Last time we ended up sleeping in the car. Never again. I didn't forget them, he said, pulling the car door open with exaggerated grace. I just misplaced them. Temporarily, right next to your sense of responsibility. He laughed. It was light, open, easy, the kind of laugh that made everything else blur. I loved making him laugh. I think part of me was addicted to it, if I'm being honest. We'd known each other for years, friends, since college, roommates for 2 semesters, now just this odd category of very close, probably too close friends. We'd always been just friends. That was the unspoken rule. But the line between just and more had been fading like pencil on an old notebook page, especially in the past few months. He always touches me in passing hand on the back when we cross a street, playful nudge to my arm when I joke about his terrible taste in music. Once, at a party, he leaned so close to whisper something that I could feel the shape of his breath against my ear. I hadn't heard a word he said. My brain had short-circuited. Still, I never dared to ask if he felt it too, because what if he didn't? We started the drive just after noon, the roads curving through sleepy hills and patches of pine. He drove, as always. One arm rested on the window, the other loose on the wheel, and he sang badly, to whatever song came on, completely unbothered by how off-key he was. I didn't stop him. I never did. His singing was part of the ritual now. Remind me again why I agreed to sleep in the dirt for 3 days, I said, pulling a granola bar from the glove compartment. Because you love suffering, he replied, without missing a beat. Also, I promised you stargazing and pancakes. Don't pretend you're not excited. I rolled my eyes, but he wasn't wrong. I was excited, just not for the reasons he thought. I didn't care about pancakes. I cared about this being beside him, uninterrupted. We arrived just before sunset. The clearing was quiet, surrounded by towering trees that filtered the evening light in soft amber streaks. There was a tiny lake, a few hundred yards out, still and silver like a mirror. I watched him as he set up the tent, his movements quick and confident. I busied myself pretending to organize our food, but my eyes kept drifting back to him, the slope of his neck, the curve of his smile when he caught the pole before it fell. I wondered, stupidly, what he'd do if I reached out and brushed the hair from his forehead. Instead, I opened a bottle of water and said, "So, who's making the fire?" He grinned over his shoulder. "You, obviously. I'm the beauty, you're the brawn." I laughed, trying not to let the warmth in my chest show too much. He made it too easy to fall, and too hard to stop. That night, as we sat side by side on the log bench, watching the fire crackle between us, I felt the pull of something unspoken building in the space where our shoulders nearly touched. And for the first time, I let myself wonder if I reached across that space, would he pull away? Or would he finally reach back? I met him during orientation week in college, both of us sitting on opposite ends of a rained-out campus tour group that got shuffled into a stuffy auditorium with flickering lights. He leaned toward me halfway through the speech and whispered, "If this guy says the word synergy one more time, I'm going to fake a medical emergency." I laughed loudly. He grinned like he'd won something. That was the start. We didn't plan to be close. It just happened. One group project turned into late-night study sessions, which turned into midnight snacks and movie marathons. By second semester, he was stealing my fries without asking and memorizing the way I took my coffee. I learned how he tapped his pen twice before speaking in class, how he chewed gum when nervous, how he avoided phone calls like they were landmines. He knew me too, probably better than I knew myself. Every time I'd go quiet, he'd know not to ask why, just sit beside me in silence until I was ready. He'd always find ways to make me laugh when I needed it most. Never big jokes, just little things. A ridiculous meme sent at the right time. A drawn mustache on my coffee cup. One time, he replaced my Zoom background with a slideshow of my worst haircut phases. I should have been mad. I wasn't. We were a rhythm, an unspoken code. Some friends are just that, friends. But we had layers. We weren't just comfortable, we were safe, which made this weekend both exciting and terrifying. The campsite was quiet that first night. Only the sounds of distant insects and the occasional snap of twigs in the brush. He sat across from me at the fire, poking the flames with a stick, the light dancing across his face in warm, flickering patterns. We talked about nothing and everything. TV shows, hypothetical fights between cartoon characters, whether or not he could win a bear in a staring contest. I called him delusional. He called me a coward. It was familiar, easy. But every now and then, he'd glance up at me in a way that wasn't entirely teasing. And every time he did, something inside me tripped. The first complication arrived that night. We only had one tent. That was planned. But apparently, he assumed we were bringing 2 sleeping bags. "You didn't pack yours?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He held up his arms in surrender. "I thought you were bringing both." I stared at him. "Why would I bring both?" "Because you love being prepared. You're the checklist guy. I'm the checklist guy, not the backup plan guy." He blinked at me for a beat, then smirked. "So we're sharing, huh?" My stomach flipped. "Looks like it." He raised a brow. I snore. "I'm aware. You sleep like a corpse. You say that like it's a bad thing." He chuckled and tossed me one of the pillows. "Just don't kick me in the night." Later, as we slid into the single sleeping bag, him first, then me carefully turning on my side to give space, I could feel the heat of his body through the thin layers of fabric. Our backs weren't touching, but the space between us felt electric, like something just waiting to spark. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I replied. "You?" "Yep." A long pause. "I could zip us in," he offered, "so we don't freeze." I hesitated. "Yeah, okay." His hand brushed my side as he reached over, and I had to close my eyes for a second. "It's nothing," I told myself. "Just logistics." But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. The next day was filled with little moments that felt like echoes of something louder. At breakfast, he burned the eggs, then tried to blame the wind. I tossed a twig at him. He retaliated by flicking water in my face. Then he slipped on wet grass and took me down with him, both of us laughing, breathless, tangled up in a heap. When we finally stood, brushing leaves off each other, his hand lingered a second too long on my hip. Neither of us said anything. Later, by the lake, he pulled out his phone to show me an old video of us dancing stupidly at a Halloween party 2 years ago. In the clip, I was laughing so hard I could barely stand. He was holding onto my hand to keep me from falling. "You remember this?" he asked, eyes on the screen. I looked at the video, then at him. "Yeah," I said softly. "I remember." He didn't look away. We were good that night. We've always been good, I wanted to say, but I want more. I've wanted more for a while now. Instead, I just nodded. The sun dipped low again by evening. Back at the tent, he unrolled the sleeping bag. Like it was routine now, I caught myself watching his hands, his arms, the little indent near his jaw when he smiled. I was tired of pretending not to notice these things. He caught me looking, and his brow lifted. What? I shook my head. Nothing. He tilted his head, curious. You get weird every time we're out here. Must be the altitude. I smirked. Maybe I just get weird around you. That made him pause, just for a second. Then he laughed, brushing past me with a shake of his head. But I noticed the red flush that crept up the side of his neck. That night, we lay side by side again, closer than before, not touching, not really, but I could feel the shape of him beside me, the rise and fall of his breathing. I wanted to turn, to reach, to say something, but I didn't, not yet. The second day started with sunlight pouring through the mesh ceiling of the tent, and the realization that I had, at some point in the night, rolled toward him, not quite touching, but close, my knee brushing his calf. His breath steady, slowy, was still asleep, his mouth slightly parted, his hand curled near his chest. He looked softer like this, less sarcastic, less chaotic, just ... real. I stayed there for a while, too afraid to move, too unwilling to leave the moment. I wasn't sure if I was savoring it or torturing myself. When he stirred, I pretended to just be waking up too. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and smiled that sleepy smile that did dangerous things to my insides. "Mornin', Snugglebug," he teased, stretching like a cat. I rolled my eyes. "You rolled into me." "Sure I did." He grinned, already halfway out of the sleeping bag. "Breakfast." I followed, cheeks still warm, heart unsteady. That was how it always was, one step forward, one retreat into humor. I never knew if it was safe to read between the lines. After breakfast, we decided to hike one of the nearby trails, a narrow path that curved up along the edge of a rocky incline and promised a view of the entire valley. He led the way, as always. Too confident, too fast, teasing me when I paused to catch my breath. But it happened halfway up a misstep on the loose gravel. A twist of his ankle, and suddenly he was down with a sharp gasp, one hand clutching his leg. Hey, you okay?" I dropped beside him instantly. He hissed through his teeth. "I stepped wrong. It's not broken, but, damn, it hurts." I checked his ankle, gently pressing around it. "It's swelling. You can't walk on this." "Guess I'll fly then," he muttered, trying to laugh but failing. We were a mile from camp, no cell signal, and the path was too rough to carry him all the way back without one of us tumbling down the ridge. "Okay," I said, thinking aloud. "We wait, give it a bit, let the swelling go down. Then I help you hobble back. Worst case, we stay up here a little longer." He leaned back against a rock, eyes squinting toward the sun. "Guess this is what I get for showing off." I sat beside him, letting the silence settle. The view stretched before us, blue sky, the vast green sprawl of trees, and the edge of the lake glimmering in the distance. It should have been peaceful, but all I could feel was how close we were now. His leg pressed to mine, his shoulder occasionally brushing mine when he adjusted. Each accidental contact was a little electric current. He sighed, glancing at me. "Sorry for slowing us down." "You didn't," I said softly. "I like being here." He smiled, slow and genuine. "With me?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The sun shifted lower as the hours passed. His ankle didn't improve much, and eventually I helped him stand. One arm slung around my shoulders, his body pressed against mine as we made the slow descent back to camp. Each step was its own kind of torture, not from the strain, but from how right it felt to have him so close. The weight of him against me, the way he trusted me to catch him when he stumbled, and the way he'd glance sideways at me, eyes darker than usual, but quiet. When we finally reached the campsite, he collapsed onto the log bench with a groan. I knelt to check his ankle again. He winced, then said, "You're being very nurse-like." I'm adding it to my resume. Hero, cook, and wilderness nurse. He gave me a tired smile. "Thanks for not panicking." "Of course," I said. "You'd do the same." His eyes met mine. "Yeah, I would." That silence again. That heavy, loaded pause that pressed between us like a held breath. It was everywhere now, like a presence, like a truth waiting to be spoken by sunset. The temperature dropped fast. He wrapped his hoodie tighter around himself, but the wind cut through it easily. "You're freezing," I said. "I'm fine. You're not." I stood, walked over, and held out my blanket. "Come on. You're not winning a macho contest out here." He rolled his eyes but didn't protest. When I sat beside him and pulled the blanket around us both, he stilled. Our legs touched, then his arm brushed mine. Then, slowly, he leaned his head against my shoulder. I didn't move. I couldn't. "I hate being still," he murmured. "I always have to be doing something, moving, talking. It's stupid, but being quiet makes me think too much." His voice was low, vulnerable. "What do you think about?" I asked, afraid of the answer, but desperate to hear it. He hesitated. "You sometimes." My heart skipped. "I mean," he continued quickly, "like how you always seem to keep it together. How you notice everything. You're always, steady. And I'm kind of a mess." "You're not a mess." "I am." He gave a small laugh. "But when I'm with you, it doesn't feel like a problem." I turned, looking at him fully now. His face was close, eyes uncertain, open, and then his hand, without warning, brushed against mine under the blanket. Not grabbing, not holding, just there, barely touching. I stared at our hands, heart pounding. I could have pulled away, but I didn't. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I wonder if you ever think about me like that." My breath caught. I didn't trust myself to speak. He turned slightly, his thigh pressed against mine. His voice lowered even more. "Do you?" I looked at him, really looked, at the furrow in his brow, the fear behind the question, the hope he was trying to hide. And in that moment, I wanted to say everything, but the words lodged in my throat. "I think about you all the time," I whispered, finally. I just didn't know if I was allowed to. He blinked slowly, then leaned in just a fraction. I could feel his breath on my cheek. Then, just as something in the air shifted again, his hand closed over mine. His fingers curled, firm but trembling, and then he fell silent. No teasing, no smirk, just him, holding me tight, like he'd been waiting to. Like he didn't want to let go. Neither did I. He held my hand for what felt like forever. Not tightly, not possessively, just enough that I could feel every beat of his pulse against my palm. Neither of us spoke. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The night was quiet, save for the occasional breeze through the trees and the soft sound of his thumb brushing over my knuckle, like he didn't realize he was doing it. I didn't move. I didn't want to. This was the closest we'd ever been, physically, emotionally, and still, there was so much unsaid between us. He finally broke the silence. "You remember that summer after sophomore year?" I blinked, surprised by the shift. "Yeah, you went home for the break. I stayed on campus. I remember. There was this one night," he said, eyes fixed on the fire. "I was in our dorm room, just lying there, lights off, couldn't sleep, and I remember thinking I miss him." My chest tightened. I told myself it was just because you were the only one who understood my stupid jokes. He went on, voice low. That it was just friendship, but it wasn't. I turned toward him slightly, unsure if I was breathing. "It's never been just friendship for me," he admitted. "Not really." His voice cracked at the edges, like he was trying to sound casual, but couldn't. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "Then why didn't you ever say anything?" He finally looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes weren't teasing or guarded. They were wide open, vulnerable, because I didn't want to lose you, he said. You're the one thing that's always made sense, and I thought if I said it out loud, it'd ruin everything. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it. I kept waiting for the feeling to go away, he whispered. But it didn't. My lips parted, but no words came. I think I've been falling for you in pieces, he said, his voice breaking into something softer. Little moments. The way you bite your lip when you're focused. The way you always know when I'm pretending I'm okay. I've been collecting all those moments, and now I can't stop. Something in me cracked wide, open. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I've felt it too, I said quietly, for a long time. He stared at me like he didn't quite believe it, like the words hadn't landed. I just thought. I trailed off, trying to find air. I thought you weren't allowed to feel that way? About me, that I'd imagined it, that I'd ruin what we had if I pushed. You didn't imagine it, he said, shaking his head. You couldn't have. Not when I looked at you like that, every day. There was a long pause, then a small broken laugh escaped him. God, we're idiots. Complete idiots, I agreed. We both laughed quietly, almost in disbelief. The kind of laugh people share right before everything changes. Then it faded into silence again. A different kind of silence full of awareness, of electricity, of something long denied finally rising to the surface. He reached up slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed, and tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear. His fingers hovered there for a second, brushing my cheek. I've wanted to do that for so long, he said. I leaned in, just a little, just enough to close the distance. Then do it again. He did. His hand slid to the side of my face, warm and trembling. Our eyes locked. Everything was suspended. I could hear nothing but the space between us. And then he kissed me, soft, careful, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he pressed too hard. I'd kissed him back. I'd imagined this so many times, lone in my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like. But nothing had prepared me for the reality of it. The heat, the trembling, the way my heart rose to my throat and stayed there. His other hand found my waist, fingers curling into the fabric of my hoodie, like he needed something to anchor him. I shifted closer instinctively, until our knees touched and our breaths were tangled. When we finally pulled back, we didn't let go. His forehead rested against mine, both of us still trying to process what had just happened. You okay? He whispered. I smiled, dazed. Yeah, you. I think I just kissed my best friend. You did? He exhaled a laugh, but his eyes were damp. I can't believe I wasted so much time. No, I said gently. We needed it. To be sure. He nodded slowly. Do you think this changes everything? Maybe, I said. But maybe it's time it did. His grip on my waist tightened slightly, and for the first time in forever. I wasn't afraid of what came next. He kissed me again, this time with more certainty, less fear, and when he pulled back, his voice was steadier. I don't want to keep pretending, he said. I want this. You, us. I nodded, overwhelmed but sure. Me too. We didn't rush to move. We just sat there wrapped in one blanket, legs tangled, hands locked between us like something sacred. That night, as we lay in the sleeping bag, we didn't say much. His head rested near mine, our hands intertwined, breath sinking like a quiet promise. No more pretending, no more silence, just him and me, and the beginning of something we'd both been aching for. The morning after we kissed felt like waking up in a dream that hadn't faded with sleep. Sunlight trickled through the tense fabric, warm and golden. I stirred slowly, acutely aware of the arm draped across my waist, his fingers resting lightly against my stomach, the weight of his forehead nestled against the back of my neck. He was still asleep, breathing slow, steady. I didn't move. I didn't want to move. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the calm inside me, like some tightrope I'd been walking for years had finally been lowered, and my feet had touched solid ground. "Morning," he mumbled suddenly, his voice gravelly and soft. "Morning," I whispered back. His fingers flexed slightly against me. "Still here, huh? Unless I'm a hallucination." "Could be," he murmured. "You feel pretty damn perfect." I smiled, heart aching in the best way. He shifted, nose brushing the back of my shoulder. "Last night wasn't a mistake, right?" I turned slowly to face him. His hair was a mess, eyes still heavy with sleep, and somehow I'd never seen anything more unfairly beautiful. "It wasn't," I said. "Not even close." Relief washed over his face like he'd been holding his breath. We lay there in silence a little longer, just looking at each other, the kind of looking that felt like touching. Eventually, he broke into a grin. "So, do I get boyfriend privileges now?" "Privileges?" I scoffed. "We just kissed." "You think that earns you privileges?" "Oh, absolutely." He rolled onto his back, hands behind his head like he was some smug prince. "I'm talking shared playlists, front seat rights, sips from your coffee, full I get to steal your hoodie's access. You already do all those things." "Yeah, but now I can do them while calling you babe." My face flushed immediately. "Don't you dare." "Too late, babe." He winked. I groaned and tossed a pillow at him, but even as I did, I couldn't stop smiling. Later, we sat by the lake, our legs stretched out in the warm grass, the silence between us no longer awkward but full of meaning. He nudged my shoulder gently. "So, now what?" I glanced over. "What do you mean, this, us? When we leave this place, go back to real life, what happens?" His tone wasn't afraid, just uncertain, like someone tiptoeing toward something fragile. I hesitated, because I'd wondered the same. Were we just caught in a moment? Was this just campfire magic and a shared sleeping bag? But looking at him now, the way he waited for my answer with hope and vulnerability in equal measure, I knew. "We figure it out," I said. "We go home and we stop pretending. We start being real." He nodded slowly. "You think we can pull that off?" "I think we've been doing it for years, just without the kissing part." He chuckled, leaned in, and kissed my cheek, gentle and unhurried. I liked the kissing part, I noticed. We stayed there for a while, soaking in the sun, occasionally tossing stones into the water, and we talked, really talked, about fears, hopes, awkward firsts. He admitted he was scared of how people might react. That part of him had always thought, if he crossed this line, people would see him differently. I told him I got it, that I'd spent years wondering if something was wrong with me, just for wanting this. But being here, like this with him, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like, finally, that night, as we lay curled in the same sleeping bag, no space between us, he whispered against my collarbone, "Promise me this isn't just some vacation fantasy." I pressed a kiss to his hair. "It's not. I want more of this," he said, voice quiet and real. "I want to wake up beside you and know it's not temporary." "You will," I whispered. "We both will." We didn't need more words after that. The silence was full. The kind of silence you only share with someone who sees every inch of you and stays. We left the campsite with the smell of ash still on our clothes and pine still in our hair. The hike back to the car was slower, mostly because of his ankle, but partly because neither of us seemed in a rush to return to the world where nothing had changed it. Everything had. He leaned against me as we walked, still limping, but less than before. "When we get home, I'm claiming your couch," he muttered, adjusting the straps of his pack. "Gonna prop my leg up and make you bring me snacks all week." "Like you don't do that already," I said. "Yeah, but now I get to call it boyfriend. Tax." I gave him a side eye. You just want an excuse to raid my cereal shelf. Not true, he paused. Well, partly true, but also, your couch smells like you. And I like that now. My chest tightened in the best way possible. We reached the car and stood for a moment in the quiet. No birds, no breeze. Just a soft wind tugging at our clothes and the rustle of leaves overhead. He turned to me, keys in hand, hesitation flickering across his face. So, when we get back, do we tell people? I leaned against the car, watching him carefully. Do you want to? He hesitated, then nodded. I think I do. I think I'm tired of hiding the best parts of my life. My throat tightened with emotion. I hadn't expected him to say that. Then we'll tell them, I said. At our pace, our way. He stepped closer, close enough that our shoes touched. Okay. But just so you know, I'm probably gonna be annoying about it. He grinned, like obnoxiously affectionate. PDA levels that will embarrass you. I will fight you in public. He smirked. Only if you hold my hand afterward. Without thinking, I reached out and laced my fingers with his. He looked down, at our hands, then up at me. His expression changed, softened. There was something in his eyes that made everything go still inside. Me like a truth finally taking shape. I'm serious, he said, voice quiet. This us, it matters. I know I joke a lot, but I need. You two know I'm all in. I know, I whispered. So am I. He exhaled slowly and pressed his forehead against mine. There was no rush, no heat. Just that stillness again, so full, so right. And then, as if sensing the moment had to be marked, he pulled something from his jacket pocket and held it up. A tiny folded scrap of paper. What's this? I asked. He smiled. Remember last year, when you made me that dumb list of things I suck at? Cooking, texting back, basic adulting. You framed it so well. I made one back. Never gave it to you. Figured now's a good time. I unfolded it carefully. In his handwriting, messy and all over the place. It read, Reasons I'm in love with you. You remember the little things. You laugh with your whole face. You're patient when I don't deserve it. You make the world feel less loud. You're the only person I've ever wanted to come home to. I swallowed hard, blinking. You kept this? I asked, voice barely audible. He shrugged, suddenly shy. I didn't know how to say it then, but I meant every word. I folded the list and slid it into my wallet like it was something sacred. Then I reached for his hand again. Come on, let's go home. As we drove down the winding road, the trees gave way to wider skies, the valley stretching into sunlight. He played his favorite Terrible playlist loud and chaotic and I didn't even mind. At a red light, he reached across the console and took my hand again, no hesitation this time. Just fingers weaving into mine like they were made to belong there. We didn't talk much during the drive, but we didn't need to. The silence was full of everything that mattered. When we pulled into the city, traffic humming around us and buildings rising back into view, I felt the old familiar weight return. Reality, routine, noise. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not when his hand was still in mine. Not when I knew he'd fight for this the way I would. We didn't get a grand ending. No fireworks or dramatic declarations. Just a quiet return to the world, side by side. But that was the point. This wasn't an ending. It was ours. The beginning of something real.